It was a beautiful day at the top of the Rocky Mountains at Sky Ranch Lutheran Camp as we gathered myself, an intern, and our confirmation kids with another congregation's confirmation kids and their young youth leader. We had just finished up one activity when the leaders of the camp blindfolded each of us, had us line up with our hands on the shoulders of the person in front of us, and then they started to lead us off. We did not know the final destination of where we were going, and because we were blindfolded, we had no idea how we were getting there. The only guidance they gave us was to call back to people behind us as we heard that there were holes or sticks to step over or whatever it was that we were encountering that we could not see. So we were being led, didn't know where, didn't know how we were going to get there, all sort of in the dark as we went. As we hear this gospel passage today, Jesus talks to the disciples who will become the early church, who will hand that church on through the generations to us. And he says to them, you can't know everything all at once. And you can imagine that if we were to sort of know how our whole life is going to unfold and all the struggles and all the joys, that it probably wouldn't be too much to bear. So he says the Spirit will come and lead you into all the truth. And having led you into all the truth, the Spirit will also reveal to you what is to come. The Spirit will glorify Jesus, and the Spirit will declare to us what belongs to Jesus, to give us what is Jesus's. And as we listen to this, it sounds then like the Spirit is the one that will guide us. But in our contemporary time that we live, and this has been true since those early disciples, there are always other voices competing with the voice of the Spirit. Particularly as a nation, as we live into an election season, I want to talk about some of those voices and how they speak to us, particularly the two candidates that are likely going to be our candidates for president. And I'm not talking about this in a political sense, but in terms of the cultural stuff that underlies the things that they are saying they will lead us to. We have one that says he will lead us to make America great again, and one who counters that and says that she will lead us to make America whole again. And as we think about what those two things mean, it really speaks about where we are in our culture. If we start with making America great again, what does that mean? Well, it grows out of the real struggles that we have as people. Some of those struggles are economic. Not everyone has been able to find a well-paying job that allows them to provide for their family while working a reasonable number of hours. And so when we talk about making America great again, they're perhaps remembering a time when they could spend time with their family and be home and live in a different way because the economic realities were different. When we talk about making America great again, it's also just about that family life. So many families live just in this place of busyness, of running from day to day to day, just trying to keep up, let alone being able to spend time together in ways that are meaningful to be able to grow together as a family. So making America great again is talking about reclaiming some of that time that we have away from the busyness and the technology in which we live. I think part of this making America great again idea speaks about our values. A sense together that we have that we've maybe lost a little bit of our moral compass, and that what we used to hold as sort of the values that we all could cling to have been in transition in some ways. And we have disagreements about some of those. Some of the values are different between different groups of us, but there are others that we could probably agree that we want to reclaim. And making America great again is about getting back to some of that. And there's another part of it that we don't talk about that's probably a little bit scary. For all of our lifetimes, America has been a superpower that was the shining light in the world that brought, freedom and the things that we carry with us. And the rest of the world generally listened to us. There are way more people in the world that aren't in America than are. And when you look at India, and when you look at China, and when you look at Africa, the center of energy in this world, economically and everything, is shifting. And that means that our voice is not listened to the way it once was. And that can be a little scary as we think about what that means if we don't get to have the biggest say and we aren't able to maybe dictate terms in the global scale that we once used to. And so making America great again is the idea of not losing hold of that and trying to do something to reclaim that. So when you take all of that together, you can talk about economics, you can talk about family life, values, and our place in the world. And when all of that seems like it's at risk and a little bit chaotic, making America great again is where some would lead us to say we need to get to that place. Making America whole again also grows out of similar sorts of pain that we feel in our lives. There are plenty of places in our culture where there's violence, right? We have violence in our streets. We have schools that get shot up. We have police that have interactions with black people, and there's Black Lives Matter, and people countering that White Lives Matter, and all in this, there's a divisiveness that we know is there. And so Make America Whole Again is trying to get past some of that divisiveness and to try to be whole and well communities. Similarly, those families that are running busy and trying to keep up economically, and they want to be whole and well, and that's all part of the neighborhoods that we live in that are so fractured just because of that busyness, that Making America Whole Again is about coming together in a different kind of way than we have been. And you can go on and look at the values again and some of those other aspects of our life, and the reality is, if you say Make America Great Again or Make America Whole Again, the pain that sits underneath of those is the same pain. All of it is the same struggle that we're having to figure out what it means to be a human being in this day and time, and how it is that we live in this day and time. And so as we hear this text from John saying that the Spirit will guide us to all truth, how is it that we live as people of faith in this place where people would lead us to be great or lead us to be whole? Martin Luther had this idea of theologians of glory and theologians of the cross. How many of you, raise your hand if you're a theologian? Okay, so theology means talk about God. Raise your hand if you talk about God. Okay, so you're theologians. Now the question is, are you theologians of glory or theologians of the cross? Which is where Luther would have this conversation with us. Now theologians of glory is kind of a complex, really multi-layered thing that Luther puts out there. But in a simple sense, it's anytime we're trying to give ourselves salvation or believe that we have something to do with it. Now we as Lutheran people would say, no, we're saved by grace through faith, right? But a theologian of glory, even just a little bit of clinging to anything that says we have something to do about that salvation is when we start to sneak into theology of glory. And we all do it, every single one of us. Anytime we say, yes, we're saved by grace through faith, but you have to accept that grace. You're sneaking into doing a little bit of work to get that salvation. Anytime we judge other people and look at them and say, well, they're clearly not going to be in God's grace, we've said that what they've done keeps them out, which means that it's about what we do, and we're sneaking into being theologians of glory again. And if you think about this whole idea of making America great and making America whole, it all rides on what we're doing ourselves. Leaders would call us to say, if we do the right things, if we get the right policies, if you elect the right people, if we all do the hard work together, we can be great again. If we all do the hard work together, we can be whole again. Now, part of Luther's idea of theologians of grace and theologians of the cross, or theologians of glory and theologians of the cross, is that theologians of glory call evil good and good evil, whereas theologians of the cross call a thing what it is. So if you think about this, make America great, make America whole, and the ways that we are being invited to live into this glory of being great or this glory of being whole, a theologian of glory would say, yep, that's what we do. And Luther would say, wait a minute. Theologians of glory call good evil and evil good. Now, evil is a strong word, but what he would say is anytime we are trying to do things on our own without God working through us, that's sinful. So, if on our own we're going to make ourselves great and make ourselves whole, Luther would say, nope, that's sinful, that's evil, that's not where you're going. And if we persist in continuing to think we can do that, then we become theologians of glory. Now, I imagine that somewhere in the Roman Empire, when it was waning, someone said, we need to make Rome what? Great again. And I bet somebody across the street said, no, we need to make Rome whole again. The Babylonians, the Persians, every empire that has come and gone, I bet they landed in that same place. Hitler did it in Germany, right? He got up and said, we need to make Germany great again. And I'm sure there were people standing there going, well, maybe we should make it whole again. All of it growing out of the suffering that they were living in together. And so when we think about this idea of glory that we can reach for, that we can get to, Luther would say that the theologian of the cross calls the thing what it is. Well, what is it? Are we ever going to get there? Are we going to be great again? And what does that mean? Well, that means everybody's got a job. Everybody's job pays them well. Everybody gets home and has dinner with their family. Our values are all common together. We are the world power, and everybody listens to what we say. Are we going to get there again? No. So a theologian of the cross, Luther would say, calls the thing what it is, and would call the idea that we can make America great again a false hope.
And we call the idea that we can make America whole again also a false hope. The criticism of Luther's theology of the cross is that it kind of gets us now to this place of, it's kind of depressing and a bummer, right? To just say, well, we can't be great and we can't be whole, and so then what do we have left? Well, what we have left is this text today. Jesus says the Spirit will lead us to all truth. The Spirit will reveal to us what will come. The Spirit will glorify who? Jesus, right? And then the Spirit, Jesus says, will give us, declare to us what belongs to Jesus. And I thought a lot about this week, what it is that particularly belongs to Jesus. And, the disciples came and they did healings and they did other things that Jesus did. But the thing that they could not do was die and be raised for all of the rest of us. That is the thing that is uniquely Jesus's, death and resurrection. So if the Spirit is going to lead us to all the truth, then what the Spirit is really going to lead us to is an understanding that life comes in death and resurrection. Not through the glory that we can build, not through the wholeness that we can build, but through what Jesus has already done to make us new. Now, that probably means a little bit of suffering. Theologians of glory try to avoid suffering. Theologians of the cross see the world through suffering. That day on the top of the Rockies, they led us to an enclosure that was roped in some trees. And they ducked us under the rope and said, okay, here's your task. While blindfolded and without talking, each of you has to find your way out of this space that you've been put in. There is a way out, but you have to find it on your own, and if you need help, just raise your hand. Well, I grabbed onto the rope and started to walk, and I encountered a tree and felt around and made sure the rope was continuous around that tree. And then I ran into some of the kids that weren't cooperating. They were going the wrong direction. So I had to let go and grab onto the rope again, and I made it all the way around to where I felt like I was where I started. And they said, well, somebody got out. And I'm like, oh, good. One of the kids figured it out already. Great. And I thought, well, it must be in the spot I skipped. So I went and kept going, and I know I made it all the way around that time, and I still hadn't found the way out. So then I said, the kids are right, you got to go the other way. And every once in a while they would say, there is a way out, don't talk to one another, if you need help, raise your hand. So I now went the other way, and did 2 laps that way, and more of the kids were getting out. So now I'm sure there's a way out of this thing that I'm just not finding. But I'm a pastoral intern. I'm here to learn and lead at the same time, so I got to figure out what's going on with this thing, and I wanted to watch. So I raised my hand and asked for help. Now understand, I did not need help. I asked for help so that I could see what was going on with the rest of these kids. I would have figured this out eventually. When I raised my hand, someone came alongside me at the rope, pulled up my blindfold, and pointed for me to duck under the rope. So the way out was what? Asking for help. Now, in all of the time since I was there, I thought that was the lesson I learned that day, was that you have to ask for help. Well, what does that mean? That means for me to get help, I have to recognize that I need help, and I have to do a little work to do it. And then I start to sneak over into being a theologian of glory and understanding that if I just ask for help and get on the right path, I can build myself to glory or make myself whole again. There were 2 people who would not ask for help. And if I had not been the intern, I would have been the 3rd, right? And they finally just had to stop me. And as I read this story this week and reflected on what it means for us to live in the brokenness that we live and trying to be called to this glory and this wholeness that we can't get to, I realized that the real lesson of that day were those 2 people who would not ask for help. Because that's really who we are. We live in this space of brokenness, and there's nothing we can do to get ourselves out of that place. Asking for help is work that we do, but we have to get broken to a point that we know we need that. And those 2 people that stayed in there had to get all the way to that place where somebody had to stop them and say, take the blindfold off, because you're not going to fix this on your own. We heard in Romans today that we are not to boast really in our own glory, but in our suffering, because suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. Theologians of the cross look at the world through suffering. We can try to avoid it and pretend it's not there, but it's in suffering that we begin to understand the brokenness that we have, and it's living in that suffering that we have this endurance that we build up, and Jesus then begins to shape us into a different character. I've had 2 opportunities to go to Haiti. There's a lot of suffering in Haiti. It's probably the poorest place in the Western Hemisphere. There's a a lot of poverty and broken families and all sorts of things. But while I was there, I met both times, some of the most joy-filled, hope-filled people that I've ever been around. And I think the reason is because they've lived through that cycle of being broken to a point that they know there's nothing they can do. And so they're suffering, and then they have to endure that suffering, and Jesus shapes a character into them that gives them a hope that is beyond themselves, a hope in Jesus that will not disappoint. And so we as a congregation and we as people of faith now are in this place where we're being called to try to make America great or make America whole. But the Spirit comes along and shapes us as people in a different way. Calls us not just into the sufferings that we have of maybe busyness or the brokenness in our own families, but a particular kind of spiritual suffering that is that crisis of understanding that we can't do these things on our own. And as we get broken into that place of suffering, then Jesus starts to gather us up new. As we endure it, shapes us as different characters so that we can not just have hope in Jesus, but be the hope in Jesus for the rest of the world. Am I suggesting that we don't vote? No. We live in a culture, and this is the way we function together. We have people that run for office. We elect people. We have laws. We have courts. We have this whole way of being together. And we are in that. We have to live in that. But the Spirit guides us by gathering us as God's faithful people to discern from God's Word and from faithful conversation together how it is that we live in that. Particularly, that we don't try to make ourselves great, that we don't try to make ourselves whole, that we open our eyes, or once they are open, we acknowledge that the suffering is there around us. We endure it because the Spirit carries us through it. It shapes our character so that we really can indeed hope that Jesus will not give us glory or will not make us whole in the way that we might think, but will make us right with God and shine light in the world through us so that that hope that does not disappoint us can reach more people, so that it's not our own glory or our own greatness that we celebrate as we gather, but it's the life that Jesus gives us to live. Amen.
Amen.